Welcome. So just fair warning, I accidentally drank more coffee. It's true, it was an accident. I accidentally drank more coffee than I was expecting. And so I may be extra fast, or I may just like collapse. So this is our Moving to Stillness meeting, which is a somatic movement exploration, or really it's just an exploration, or could say an education in somatics. So somatics, you might wonder, what is somatics and what is the benefit? So I've been trying to be better about being clear about what are these meetings about and what can you expect, because you want to make sure that you're in the right place, right? Because you could be doing other things, so you want to know, is this the right thing? And so what is somatics, and what is the benefit to us of somatics? Well, first of all, we want to look at what is somatics. If we understand somatics as like a tool or a model, it's for a purpose. What is that purpose? It's to address something that is troubling us, right? So this is a helpful tool for what ails you, and what in somatics, what we call this thing that's ailing you is, we call it sensory motor amnesia. So in other meetings, we were talking about something in a different way. They're very much a lot of overlap, right? But when it's not like interchangeable. So the somatics meeting is its own thing, and it's a particular way of seeing. It's a particular way of perceiving. It's a particular framework. And I'm sharing it because I perceive and I experience that it's very valuable and helpful. So I want you to understand and have access to this way of perceiving, this framework, so that you can make use of it for yourself. So in somatics, we describe the problem, as it were, as sensory motor amnesia. So we all have a sense that there's a problem. Now that problem, we perceive it as we have a story about it. It's that pain because of that accident that I had 30 years ago. It's the unhappiness that I experienced because of that person. It's the despair I experienced because of the economy. It's the, on and on. We've got various stories for it. But here, what we're saying is those stories aren't really all that helpful, right? Because you don't have any real agency over those things. If your problem is caused by something that happened in the past, where you can't go and change it, or if it's because of some external objective situation or circumstance, what are you going to do about it? And you see, you can't really do much about it other than just complain, which is what a lot of the world is involved in. But here we're looking at, is there something that I can actually do? Because I got to be honest with you, a lot of the time I would go to things, and maybe you can relate to this. I'd go to some kind of class or meeting of something that I was attracted to, where I thought this is maybe going to help me. But then I would be sitting there and I'd be thinking, so how can I make use of this? And it wasn't clear to me how I could make use of it. I knew that I had a problem. I knew that I was looking for a solution to that problem, but I didn't know if this was the right solution, or even what it was and how I could apply it. So here, what I'm interested in very much is practical solutions, practical remedies. So please understand that there's a lot of words and concepts that are being shared here, but they're pointing to something that you can do, something that you can actually do. You can put your focus and your attention and your intention into this. And what I'm telling you, and what others who are advocates of somatics will tell you, because it's our experience, is this is a wonderful thing that will offer myriad benefits. So the problem, as we describe it in somatics, is sensory motor amnesia. And basically what that means is that you as a human being, so we're addressing, technically in somatics, we're addressing a soma, but we've talked about that in past meetings, and that's a whole meeting just to get into what is a soma. So rather than mire ourselves in that today, we'll just say as a human being. They're not necessarily interchangeable terms, but today we'll just say as a human being, necessarily you must move. Movement is intrinsic in what it is to be human. You can't be human without movement. You just can't. It's not a possibility. So movement is part of an intimate part, an essential part of what it is to be human. And but oftentimes what happens is we are moving less and less and less. So this whole part of our nervous system is actually called the somatic nervous system. This whole part of our nervous system is actually primarily interested in movement. That's its main focus, movement. And you think about all the various complex things that we do and all the things that make up our whole culture and society. And it really kind of just comes down to movement. So everything that the human is involved in is movement, whether that's breathing, walking, talking, even thinking, even just imagining is movement. So it's a subtle movement, but there's a movement in taking place in the nervous system, and it's that same movement in the nervous system manifests in this huge range of experience, from the very subtle to the very gross level. So we can make use of this. Okay, this is the point, is but most of the time we have forgotten a lot of how to move with efficiency, skill, and pleasure. So we experience frustration, right? We experience feeling stuck. We experience depression. As I talked about, I think yesterday in the meeting, to understand that these ways that we describe our experience, the way that we feel, they have their images that go along with them in space. So we actually have a mental model. We usually ignore that, but think about what it means to be depressed. What is it to depress something? There's a pressing on it. Isn't that what it is to be depressed? It's to take on that burden of being pressed. So these are all things that we are doing, but we don't know. We've forgotten that we're doing them. That's what it is. So that's what sensory motor amnesia is that every experience that we're having is a doing. We're doing that. It's our nervous system is working to do that thing. And there are physiological correlates, because the brain is intimately connected with the rest of the body, and it's signaling to the musculature, particularly, saying, hold this posture. And that shows up as clenching the jaw and furrowing the brow and pressing the tongue and clenching the throat and squeezing the chest and rolling the shoulders and tightening the back, and all the various things that we do, but they're happening subconsciously. So as I'm pointing this out, you're not aware, you don't know how you're doing it. The only thing you know is that you feel bad or you feel good, but all you know is how you feel. And that feeling, this is a very important point in my version of somatics, is that feeling is doing. You cannot have feeling independent of doing. So when we have feeling, what it is showing us, so just notice that you're feeling right now. And notice that you're in the habit, because we all are, because we've been trained, of perceiving that what you're feeling is just something happening to you, right? It's just something happening to you. Feeling is just like the wind blowing. It's just something happening to you, and you have no agency in that. At least not, maybe we're taught, well, if you know, over time, if you work hard, you have some agency, right? You know, if you're feeling depressed, well, then you work hard, buddy, and you eat well, and you get out there in the sun and take a brisk walk and, you know, do all these things, and then you'll feel better. So we're taught that, maybe, but we're definitely not taught that we can actually, presently, instantaneously recognize how we're doing that thing and cease to do it. That's not common knowledge, but that's what somatics is talking about. It's saying that if you're feeling something, you're doing that thing. You're not aware of how you're doing it because you've forgotten, and it's called sensory motor amnesia. So you can, that term starts to help you have a better understanding of what's happening. It's like you are someone, but you've forgotten. All of this is there for you, but you've forgotten. And so now all of these habits in the neuromuscular system are happening, but you don't know. Now, how does sensory motor amnesia come about? This isn't just merely academic. It's so that we can start to better understand what we're dealing with. Otherwise, we perceive it incorrectly as the boogeyman, or the bogeyman, or however you pronounce it in your region. But or if you don't know what I'm talking about, scary mythical thing. And so what we've done, though, is because we don't understand it, because we have sensory motor amnesia, it's just sort of relegated to the problem, the scary thing that's trying to harm me, that's oppressing me or depressing me or whatever it's doing to me, causing poking and prodding so that I feel so miserable. And we want to wake up to it and shine a light on it and see what is it really, so that we are no longer spooked by it. So it's really important to understand sensory motor amnesia is the name of this condition. How does the condition come about? It's not because life is bad. It's not because you must suffer. It's not because of all the various reasons that we've accepted for why it just is that I have to suffer. Rather, it is because of basically one of two things, or a combination of the two things. Okay, so we can really keep it simple and just see it's just one or the other, or some combination of these two things. So one, and this is not going to be news to most of you because I've been speaking about it, but I have to repeat it because it's really, really important to understand. One is that it happens because of a sudden intensity that overwhelms the system. So you fell, you got hit. There was a hurricane that hit. Somebody screamed at you. Somebody disapproved of you. I mean, it could be, you see, it could be super dramatic, or it could, somebody else, it could seem like absolutely trivial and not like nothing even happened, but it's about how it was overwhelming to your system in that moment. That's all that's required. It doesn't matter what it looks like externally. It doesn't matter objectively. Subjectively, the system was overwhelmed. And so whatever happens in that moment, which is going to be very primitive, it's something that's called upon from deep down in our evolutionary development. Okay, so then well, I've covered only one of them because I want to get on to the next thing, which is how it manifests. But I guess I got to cover the other thing. Is okay. The other thing is that it could be So one is it could be sudden intensity that overwhelms the system. The other is that it could be just because of repetition, because you have a sense, so imagine for a moment that you work a job that you hate. Hate's a strong word, but imagine that you hate the job that you work, okay? But imagine also that you have a story that you really believe in, that you must work that job in order to survive, okay? So here you are in a very difficult situation, right? Because you really don't want to do this thing. But on the other hand, you're terrified not to do the thing because you perceive that your very survival depends upon it. Now, that might seem extreme, but to some degree, this kind of conflict is present in all of us more or less all the time. Is that we have these two things going on. One is I don't want to do it. The other is I must. So that produces what's called a green light reflex. The sudden, accidents, well, repetition can also produce also. So another variation is red light, which is withdrawal. And then there's what's called trauma reflex, which is side bending or moving around. So these are the three basic ways in which it manifests. So it can, just to review, so the problem is what we call sensory motor amnesia, which is that you're doing something, but you forgot that you're doing it. And you don't like the feeling that that doing produces, but you've forgotten that you were even doing it or how you were doing it. And so you can't stop doing it. So then this comes about in generally one of two ways, which is one, sudden intensity that overwhelms the system. The other is because of repetition. So you're in some situation over and over and over and over and over. It could be because of the chair you sit in at work that tends to encourage a very particular posture. It could be because of, you're using some machinery or equipment that's one-sided, or because you're playing sports, athletics. These people may love what they're doing. It doesn't even have to be something they hate doing. You could have somebody who loves playing violin, somebody who loves running and jumping, and they're doing that over and over and over and over and over. But because they're doing it without maximum efficiency over time, what gets into the system, the learned habit, what's the only thing known, the only way known to achieve the desired outcome is one that results in fatigue, exhaustion, pain, discomfort, and everything that flows out of that. But you because you want to do the thing, or because you feel that you must do the thing, and you're doing it over and over and over and over, your brain just ceases to be engaged in an active, conscious way. Instead, it's just using the pattern. There's a pattern there. Now that pattern may be an absolutely awful pattern, but as long as the nervous system only knows that, and you're not engaged in a conscious way to regain conscious voluntary control and proper sensory awareness of that, it just keeps happening. So, but very importantly, because it continues to happen, so it's not like there's something from the past that is causing this problem. It's always happening now. And this is the big, huge, wonderful thing about all of this, is that no matter how long we've been doing it, no matter how scary it seems, no matter how big it seems, we're always only doing it right now. And if we're doing it right now, we can stop doing it. It's such an important point, because if it's some cumulative effect over the last 50 years, then you have to undo 50 years to get back to baseline. But with somatics, the wonderful news is You're doing it always only right now, and you can cease doing it right now. And the instant you cease doing it, well, you're no longer doing it, are you? And it goes completely counter to everything that we've been taught and how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive the world. So that's the biggest challenge. The challenge is not actually in ceasing to cause yourself pain through unnecessary effort, because that's truly effortless. So you're presently making effort. To cease to do that is effortless. So it's completely effortless. There's nothing at all, no effort whatsoever involved in it. So the challenge is not about that. The challenge is just because we're so in the habit of believing a radically different story. We're very committed to our mental models of reality. So we use movement as a means by which to bring consciousness online so that we can become aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and thereby cease doing it, so that we can experience the true foundation of wellness. You think about, if your foundation is not true, doesn't matter how fantastic your technique is, you can't make use of that because your foundation is not stable. You have to have a very solid foundation. When your foundation is stable, oh my goodness, you can do anything and everything. But most of the time, we're not encouraged to get back to the foundation. Now, there's good reason for that. I mean, one is just because people don't know. And the other is because people are terrified. So you have to understand that this is a process that is not for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to be clear on what you want and to commit to something that will help you to achieve that. Most of the time, we're not clear on what we want. I obviously go on at length about that very often, but hopefully you can see why it's so important, because there's another important understanding for somatics. I mean, there are many, but another one that I'm going to mention now, which is something I've also been talking about recently. It has to do with something called proprioception. So proprioception, I think my hope in using that word is not to baffle you or make you think, oh, this sounds very important, but rather just because it's a specialized vocabulary. And once we all can understand that vocabulary, it's a shorter way of communicating. So I'm going to try to maybe introducing the vocabulary over the weeks and repeat them and the definition of them. And then hopefully we can start to just use the shorter, more efficient way of communicating. So proprioception is the way in which there's a function of your nervous system that is monitoring you in space, your perception of yourself in space. So we are multidimensional beings, right? I mean, that sounds very new age, but it's just simply true, right? I mean, we know that I can sit up. Okay, so I've got height, and I like to think I have depth, but we have sense of depth, and breadth or width. Okay, so we sense ourselves as these three-dimensional beings at least, and then we also exist in a fourth dimension, time. So we have awkward relationship usually at best with time, but we do perceive that there's a relationship there, that there's, I exist in time, or time exists in me. There's some relationship. And so we're multidimensional beings. And so proprioception is just the name of the function of our nervous system that is able to determine where do I exist in space. So if you're comfortable doing so, you can even close the eyes. We did this yesterday, but it's a very useful exercise. Just close the eyes and just notice that you have a sense of yourself in space. You, if you have a sense of, are you sitting up? Are you lying down? Are you reclining? Are you leaning? Are you, on your side? You have a sense of this, and this is because of your proprioception. So then, even with eyes closed, you can predict, if you have an intention, I want to lean, and choose a direction that you want to lean. So you have an intention now to lean in that way. So you have this awareness of this intention, volition, you want to do this. There's a desire. So get clear on that. Get clear. So every time you're imagining it, you're actually getting clearer on how to do it. So you imagine it. Imagine this. So you have the intention. You can imagine, and then now you're getting clearer. You have a prediction about what that experience will be like. Notice that. There's a prediction. You're anticipating that if you were to take that action, how that would feel. This is your proprioception. Okay. So now you can, as long as you're comfortable with eyes closed, you can do it. If not, don't do it, or do it in a way that's comfortable, but just a little bit, but just move in that direction and notice, does it feel right to you? In other words, was your prediction about what it would be like, is it true? And as long as you allow yourself, what you'll find is that actually eventually it becomes true, at least, because if you allow yourself, then you're going to actually match your prediction. That's how you're achieving the goal, is by matching it proprioceptively. Okay. And you can come back to whatever is center and comfortable, or completely relaxed for you. And you can notice that too, that your same process, you're predicting what that will be, and then you come to that. Now and you can open the eyes whenever you wish at this point. Now, notice that that's a completely subjective experience. In other words, does not depend upon any external feedback. You're not monitoring yourself from the outside, you're monitoring yourself from the inside. Proprioception is relative, not absolute. So hopefully that makes sense, but I'll just try to clarify this in case it's not. What the implication of this is, that if your proprioception is not calibrated so that it aligns to the objective space, then your inner perception, your proprioception, is going to tell you, I'm doing it correctly. I'm in the right orientation. I'm in the right position. I'm doing it successfully. If I'm sitting upright, I'm perfectly upright. That's what your proprioception is going to tell you. But if your proprioception is slightly miscalibrated, so that it's not aligned to the objective reality, well, so then you might be leaning or hunching, or any number of things, all kinds of things that could be going on. And you're proprioceptively, you're perceiving, I'm doing it correctly, I'm upright. Third person comes along and they're like, hey buddy, you look kind of uncomfortable. Like, well, What makes you say so? Well, because you're all hunched over and leaning and tilting and, you know, all these things, you just look uncomfortable. Plus you're not breathing. So proprioceptively, we think we're doing it correctly, but we need to be able to get our proprioception aligned with the third person. So first person and third person need to come into alignment. When they're in alignment, what's happening is that we're not working against ourselves. In other words, all of the habits that of some sensory motor amnesia that we've forgotten about are dissolved so that we're not doing those things. And instead, we're just aligned with this three-dimensional reality so that we're not working against ourselves. Remember what I said, that we need to get back just to the basic. We need to have this very fundamental foundation stable before we do anything else. And that's not bad. That's very good. It's wonderful. Most people never in this lifetime will get a stable foundation. So rare, but you can. That's the gift. So now, movement. So why movement? Well, movement. So there are some very, very powerful, I'm looking up here because I'm not going to try. I have the books here, but for once, I have the book I'm looking for right here, but I'm not going to try to get it down because it will bring all the other books down with it. But I'm mesmerized. I have books on this subject. I have books on many strange subjects, but I have books on this subject of healing postures. So there are traditional postures that are physical postures that are valued. It's like a universal human cultural phenomenon. In cultures all everywhere, it's been found evidence of these traditions of healing postures. Not all exactly the same postures, that's not the point, but rather that there's some recognition that certain postures are expressions of a particular energy, particular kind of energy, and that particular kind of energy offers particular kinds of benefits. So you could have posture. It's not just healing postures. That's the book that I have, but or no, that's ecstatic postures. But they offer different energies that people they've just basically learned. Okay, here's how to set the human body to be channeling that energy. That energy can be experienced when this particular configuration of the body is produced. So one of those postures that actually is very commonly found, though, even though it's not always the same posture, but one of them is the basic stance of and I don't know the proper pronunciation of it. I think it's Jia. It's standing basic Qi Gong standing meditation. And it's just standing with the hands are in front of the body and just upright. And this posture is a very important foundation for some, maybe many forms of inner arts and Qigong. It is just to stand in that posture. And there are certain cues for what to look for. They're given, sync the chi and all these different cues that are given, but it's directing the person into a particular posture. And this posture, when it's really experienced, is they're saying, so good, it's worth it. That's what their promise is. They're like, you get into this posture, and when you get it, it's going to be like you're going to be so happy. So that's awesome. And like I said, maybe I think it was in last week's meeting, that somatics is the key that unlocks the potential of these things. But without somatics, without the insights of somatics and the practical application of it, the chances of you getting into that posture are so small, because unless you're already close, if you're already close enough, then you'll settle into it. But that's for somebody who's relatively well. And the majority of us are not relatively well. We're relatively unwell, which means, maybe 100 years ago, the majority of the people were relatively well. So you hear about these miracle cures from doing these, Tai Chi or whatever. They're real, but unfortunately, many times, those who most desperately need that healing are so far off from it, making so much effort against themselves, that they're not in this lifetime, left to their own devices. They are not going to get to that posture, even if they try. Even the person who says, I'm going to commit to 8 hours of standing every day for as long as it takes. And even if they do it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, if they were not by some miracle directed in the right direction, the chances are they're just going to exacerbate the existing problems, the existing somatic sensory motor amnesia. Why? Because remember, there's two ways that sensory motor amnesia come about. One is high intensity. Second one, repetition. So no matter how it initially comes about, whether it's high intensity or because of repetition, the more it's repeated, the more pronounced it becomes. And all along, we think we're doing the right thing. So that's the tragedy of it. But now, the wonderful thing is that Somatics offers us some tools that we can use to greatly help ourselves, so that we're not leaving it so much to chance. And so what are those tools? Well, and some of these may seem trivial. They really may seem trivial, but it's important to not trivialize them, because these are the tools that, in a sense, almost everybody knows about, but nobody really knows about. It's like the secret in plain view. So when you hear these things, really take them in and reflect on them, receive them as okay, so this is new information I'm hearing. Even if I think I already know it, this is new information. I'm receiving it in that way. Let me really take it in. What is this? What is the power of this that I can start to make intelligent use of? So one is slow down. Now, this does not mean that that our goal is to become super slow in everything that we do. No, but it is for when we're specifically engaging in somatic exercise or somatic movement exploration or somatic inquiry. We are saying, I have a purpose, I have an intention for this activity. If you think about it, we really want to be clear in general about what is the purpose of any activity that I'm engaged in. And if I don't have a clear purpose, I'm better off not doing it. And then you see how much compulsive activity is taking place all the time. And rather than being overwhelmed by that, just say, you know, wow, this is but fantastic. Here's a tool or a set of tools and a knowledge base that I can use to solve that, so that I can be at rest, so that I can experience the peace of being, the joy of being, the ease of being. These are realities that can be experienced. So when you have a purpose, you have to be clear about that. You say, right now, or for the next 5 minutes, or for the next 10 minutes, my intention, and I'm going to give my full attention to this to the very best of my ability, is that I am intending to reawaken my somatic awareness so that I can regain voluntary motor control, so that I can cease to work against myself, so that I can have better experience. It's a very, you have to remind yourself of this. It's a very worthwhile goal. This is the most important thing I'm choosing to do this because it's a high priority for me. I see the wisdom in it, and maybe even I've had experiences of the benefits of it. And so I'm committed to doing this because it's something that I can do where I can actually have practical results, real benefits, where I can start to see that I give my attention to something, I prioritize it, I get clear on what I'm wanting for these 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I see a benefit. So I'm making that choice. That's important. So now I'm clear on what I'm doing for this time. It's not just what was I doing? Am I hungry? Am I bored? Should I go watch some stuff on YouTube? No. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm committing to a very high priority thing that I can do to help myself to have greater agency, confidence, and harmony of expression and joy and peace. It's like the most important thing I can do. I'm choosing that. So we want to remember that, then apply ourselves. And during that time, we want to slow down. So slowing down it's in a sense, it's a trick. Yeah, it's a trick, but it's a good trick. It's one that we're purposefully taking hold of. We're purposefully using this. So sensory motor amnesia is when the activity is so deep down in the unconscious, what's called in the brain called the subcortical regions, that I've forgotten that it's even there. Consciously, I don't even remember that it's there. So that's what sensory motor amnesia is. It's so deep down that I don't even know it's there. It's like if you've ever gone through, you got a box at the bottom of some closet you haven't gone through for 5 years, and you get that out and you're like, I forgot this. I forgot this was even there. It's like that. So in order to regain voluntary control, well, first of all, we have to even know that it's there. Well, so what that means is we need to bring it into the cortex. Okay, so the brain activity shifts from subcortical to cortical. So we're having to encourage that. Now, we just happen to know that subcortical, okay, so it's deep down in the subcortex, unconscious. We know that that's really, really fast. We know that those things that happen, like if you are caught by surprise, right? If you're caught by surprise, what do people do when they're surprised? They actually, it's a red light reflex. Ooh, ooh. The air comes out, the front collapses. There's this whole very primitive reflex. Nobody's thinking about that. It happens because they're surprised, so they're overwhelmed, you see. So the conscious part can't process that fast. If the processing needs to be that fast, if the nervous system determines this might be really dangerous, then you're not going to be able to process that consciously. It's going to automatically, without you choosing, it's going to automatically drop down into the subcortex. And whatever's there is what's going to come out. And when we're really surprised, then it goes all the way back to the most primitive reflex. It is the most primitive reflex. It is in every species of animal. It is the only reflex that newborn infants demonstrate, and it is red light. And so that's when we're truly surprised, that's what's there. That's our safety net. It's like when everything else fails, do this. And so we know that it's super fast. It's the fastest. It's the fastest. So what that means is the I don't know what the thing that goes along with that is that what is cortical is relatively slow. So subcortical fast, cortical slow. So what we refer to as conscious awareness is happening in its manifestation in the human nervous system. It's happening with more activity in the front of the brain. What is the lower down in the brainstem, we're talking about just pumping, beating your heart, making the lungs move, basic metabolic functions, nothing else. That's the most primitive stuff. So, which obviously has to be super fast, super high priority. Think about what your nervous system is monitoring. Such an intricate system. I mean, like the pH of the blood is so tightly controlled. And from all, like, we're in the organism is in this environment. We are in this environment here like a fish is in water. It's in us, through us. So an enormous amount of feedback from the environmental contact, all the processes, all, the emotions, the regulation of all the systems, all of that so tightly regulated. And always, 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 if for just half a second it wasn't happening, you'd be dead. Super fast. And multitasking, right? So we use a trick. And it's a very, very, very important trick. So important that if you don't do it, you're fooling yourself and you're not doing somatics, and you're not going to help yourself in the way that you would help yourself with somatics. So slow down. Seems, like I said, it seems so trivial, but you slow down enough, you're forcing yourself to be cortical. You're forcing yourself to become consciously aware. Now, most of us are so uncomfortable with that because it's so unfamiliar, because it's not this constant fixation on thought. You can't be constantly fixated on thought if you're actually consciously aware. So that is such an unusual and uncomfortable, therefore, experience for most of us that we can't manage it for long. Even though it's a superior state, it's more efficient, it's more pleasurable, offers more resilience. It is so much better. But remember about what I said about proprioception. Well, that generalize that in terms of just our inner sensing, inner modeling. So you can see how that's playing out, where we're actually working hard all the time to stay to our mental model of who I am, which means how I feel, what I think, how I act, all of these things. And so when we make any change to that, unbeknownst to us, our subconscious, 95% of our nervous system activity is working night and day to maintain that. And this puny 5% is working, for a couple of minutes here and there, trying to overcome it. It's not going to happen. We're just going to stay with our mental model unless we force, oh, I know this is a terrible word, but I said it. We force ourselves, trick ourselves, but in a good way. We trick ourselves to become consciously aware. So you have to trust that if you're slowing down, you're consciously aware, but your nervous system is going to be kind of screaming at you in the background saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? You got to pay attention to all these worries. You got to do all that other usual stuff. What are you doing? You're not even thinking right now. That's stupid. That's what it's going to say. It's dangerous. So you have to just know that, and that's why you commit. So I know we're not doing like a practical application in the meeting today, obviously, because it's almost over. But this knowledge that I'm sharing with you is so much more important, because this is like, if you teach a man to fish versus just giving him a fish. So this is the basic knowledge that you can use to really understand what somatics is and how you can begin to put it into practice in your life to gain the benefits. Obviously, there's so much more than what can ever be shared in a single hour or even in many hours, because what we're talking about is, in a sense, it's an art that has been cultivated by so many different traditions for such a long time. And then even in this most kind of recent expression of it, expression of it, I guess, which is what I share from, which is it's obviously a unique combination of things, but very significantly influenced by that work of Thomas Hanna, who was drawing very heavily on the work of Moshe Feldenkrais, all of whom, whether they consciously acknowledged it or not, I think Hanna did, had owed a debt to Alexander for developing the Alexander technique. So this is an enormous body of knowledge. There are, thousands upon thousands of practitioners who have their own unique clinical experience that contributes a great deal. So there's an enormous amount that is available that we can all benefit from, but we have to start with the basics. And without the basics, we can't take advantage of any of those things or get the benefits of them. So even though, in a sense, it seems like maybe we didn't cover that much, but on the other hand, we covered an enormous amount. So just to recap, and then try to sum up, I want to sum up also for you how you can put this into practice in a good way that you can start to get the benefits. So what we've covered is that we're from the somatic framework, we have a name for this condition, which is the essential problem. And we call it sensory motor amnesia. And sensory motor amnesia simply means that we have forgotten consciously that we're doing something that is producing the experience that we are having. And to the degree that that is painful to us, then we experience suffering. And there is a remedy for that that is fairly precision as far as it goes. So it's not just kind of like, let's just take a, broad strokes approach. It's actually very, in a sense, very refined, having a refined understanding of what's going on from a nervous system perspective and how we can specifically begin to work with that. So sensory motor amnesia is these things that we're doing that are producing the experiences that some of which we like, many of which we don't like. And the sensory motor amnesia came about in part because of high intensity for us experiences that overwhelm the system, drew upon some more primitive, clunky reaction, and that just sort of stuck and we forgot about it. So then we're just cringing or whatever for the rest of our lives until we again regain somatic awareness. But so one way is high intensity experience. Another way is simply through repetition. And then however it begins, the more we repeat it, the more it goes deeper and deeper into the subcortex, and it just becomes, we completely forget about it, even to the point where you consider people, many, I mean, you watch me a lot, so I've got funny movement patterns, funny little tics that they're cues to you that you know who this one is, right? You're like, oh yeah, it's not just that he has this funny looking beard and bumpy nose and whatever. It's also because of, that movement and the hand thing and whatever. So those patterns actually, for most of us, they're so subcortical, we don't even remember, we don't even know we're doing them. But as they work their way up, or if they haven't gone that far down, we still have a kind of vague awareness. It's like, oh yeah, I know I'm doing that, but we're not sure really how. So then the remedy to this problem, I mean, it would be like a tremendous waste of time just to describe the problem without, and sort of like very unkind, yeah. Say, look, I've perfectly described the problem, and then you're like, okay, and what do I do about it? Oh, there is nothing to do about it. No, and now what's the remedy? So in somatics, we say when we understand the problem, then we can correctly identify what the remedy is. If the problem is that we've forgotten, then the remedy is that we need to remember, right? I mean, it just makes perfect sense. If the problem is that we've forgotten, then we just need to remember. So the question is, how do we remember? And there are many different techniques and nuances for that. Again, we can't go into all of them in a 1 hour meeting, but we can talk about one of them. And it's the most important one, the one without which nothing else will work, which is to slow down. Because when you slow down, and it goes along with that to say also do just the one thing, which I kind of hinted at, but I wasn't explicit about, right? But when I said you get clear, what's my purpose of my activity for the next 5 minutes, the next 10 minutes. So that's one thing, right? I'm only going to do this one thing. Of course, you'll find yourself doing a million other things, but each time you just you're like, what am I doing? Oh yes, this one thing. Come back to the one thing. So you're forcing yourself to become cortical conscious because you're utilizing this knowledge of the nature of the nervous system. The subcortical is multitasking. The cortex is one thing only. So we need to have the one thing, just one thing that I'm doing for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And, or even 1 minute. I mean, it depends. Sometimes 1 minute is all we can, after 1 minute, we're so exhausted. Okay, then that was it, just 1 minute. But you're committing to it for some amount of time. And then we also want to slow down, because these two things, it's like a 1-2 punch. You know, these two things work together to strengthen our ability to be conscious. So one thing, focus, and the other is slow down, slow down. So if now I'll just throw in just a final pointer, because I also said, okay, now how can you make use of this? So also do movement. I won't give you all the reason why that is. There are many reasons why, but just to keep it simple, because we are a little over, I want to say how you can make use of this is you do movement, make the movement a movement where you feel comfortable and confident. Now, that might be that it's not even a movement then, except that it is, it's just very subtle. But it may be that somebody else watching you might say, I didn't see you move. But if you're perceiving the movement, even if it's very subtle, it counts. Okay. So it could be that that's the only movement where you have confidence and comfort, is just that almost just imagined movement. And if that's the only place that you have the comfort and confidence to do that movement, you do that movement only until you start to gain confidence that you could do something a little bit more, which might be just the tiniest little movement. And you keep doing that until you have comfort and confidence there, and so forth and so on. So here we start where you have the comfort and confidence. You know, like I often say, we have to start where we are. And in terms of somatics, we're talking about the conditioning of the nervous system. That's where you have to start. So if your nervous system says, this is upright, and you say, well, I know this isn't upright because I'm looking in the mirror, so I'm going to do this. In some ways that could be helpful, but in other ways it might just be too much. So instead of, and the way you get here will not be the right way. It will just be to try harder. So now you're just making things worse for yourself. So we want to start where we are. If where we are is here, okay, start here. No, but we want to start to become aware of, what is this really? What is this experience? And you start to notice that, oh God, it's really kind of uncomfortable, and I'm holding my breath, and all these things. Okay, you're just starting to notice that. Now we want to move. So we're starting here. Now, how am I going to move? Well, I just notice, okay, from here, how can I move a little bit? Okay, maybe I can move like this. So it's interesting. But then I'm like, yeah, but I know that actually I'm wanting to move more like this. So we use that third person knowledge. If it's obvious, if I'm looking in a mirror and I'm way over here, I know I got to get over here. But how I get there matters, you see, matters immensely. So if I'm here, I just start moving a little bit, small movement where I say, it's a little bit of a stretch, but as comfortable and confident as I get in movement, I can do this. Okay. So then I say, okay, but now I know I want to go that way. So I could just like first person subjectively just stay here forever and maybe get, bigger sways, and that might work eventually, but I can be intelligent about it and say, okay, I'm moving a little bit here, but I know I want to go that way. So what if I just slowly kind of start to move in this way? So as I'm moving, well, I'm showing that pretty fast, to be honest. All right. So I want to demo kind of, how fast is subjective, but I'm not going to keep leaning that way. It's too uncomfortable, but it's subjective. So don't think, if I'm demoing something, don't try to do it the way I'm doing it. You have to feel into what is slow. So slow for you could be like, or maybe that's too fast. Maybe you got to slow it down even more. But eventually, maybe you now you need to move it a little faster, because remember, I said it early on, but our goal isn't just to always move slowly. Our goal is to move fluidly, efficiently, and with pleasure. So we want to be able to move slow. We want to be able to move fast. We want to be able to move everywhere in between with competence and confidence, ease and pleasure. So we start where we are, make intelligent use of that third person data. If you can see yourself in a mirror and you know you're just like way off, then don't disregard that, but don't try to force yourself into what you think is the right thing. No, just take that into account as you're exploring your slow, gentle movements that maybe kind of starting to slowly explore more this way might be intelligent. That's all. So one thing, keep the attention on that one thing, which is I'm going to commit to this somatic movement exploration for the next 5-10 minutes. Slow down. And you'll find yourself, probably, you start out really slow, and then all of a sudden you come to and you're like, what? And you're just like whirling around and crazy stuff going on. You're like, whoa, what just happened? You just noticed that you just checked out because it was too much for you. There was too much movement. So you do less and slow it down so that you can remain present. So it's very personalized. Don't try and do what you think somebody else is doing. You have to take these pointers, the principles, the instructions, and then apply them. So my recommendation is I've given you these tools, or the pointers for how to start to take use of it. I would suggest you start out by finding a posture where you feel it's a good edge for you, where you feel you feel supported. You're not so straining that you can't even endure it, which might sometimes that's lying down, sometimes that's sitting up, sometimes a lot of variations, but you find that posture. But we're also there's enough of a challenge where don't have enough clarity, where you notice there is some discomfort, there is some strain a little bit, because that's going to give you room to grow, room to free up into. And so you want to find that edge, and then you want to make small movements where you have that competence and confidence in the movement. Now, I'm like sort of just making circles as I'm sitting. That's one example of a movement. It depends where you're really called to. Maybe it's with the head, maybe it's with the jaw. So many, maybe it's just with the shoulder. So many possibilities, but you just slow it down and you just notice as you're doing it, how could this be easier? How could it be smoother? How could it be more pleasurable? How could it be more free? And so with those as your guide, you start to notice, oh, maybe I was doing too much, too big. I was starting too big. And like I'm moving my left shoulder, and I was making such big movements with my left shoulder, I couldn't even relax my right shoulder. So I have to slow it down, make them smaller. And then I realized, oh, that right shoulder can release. Oh, that's so much better. So you see, it's not exclusive focus just on what's moving, but that slow movement starts to reveal where the unnecessary effort is being made, where all the unnecessary strain is. So this very simple, very sort of primitive almost technique that I'm describing, will it give you the fastest results? Probably not, because there are many refinements, many ways to improve upon that. But this is the most important, essential foundation, and it will give you very good results. It will reliably give you good results. And if you really understand the instructions and you really sincerely apply it, it will start giving you good results right away, and they will just get better the more that you practice it, because you will be gaining so much more somatic awareness, so much more ability to be consciously present and so forth. There are many, many, many huge benefits of it. So I'll just wrap it up by saying, then with what frequency should you do this? Oh, one more thing about that is just always, 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 it's kind of implicit, but I want to be explicit about it. Gentle, 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 gentle. It should always be so gentle, and this is the truth. So it's a good reminder about if you're overreaching or not. If you cannot breathe in a smooth, relaxed, independent, pleasurable way throughout the entire movement, then you're trying, it's too big of a movement, it's too fast of a movement. So it just means slow it down, make it a little smaller so that you can start to feel how you've been holding the breath, and you can really you'll find a huge core relief in that. It's a very important thing. And I saw the question, would I always recommend doing both sides? If you're doing something that's on one side, chances are you're going to want to do it on the other side. And yes, I would recommend doing it on both sides. And here, the main reason is because you'll get faster, better results. Because if I just move just the left shoulder, then I'm getting that experience that's refining the movement of the left shoulder. Now, some of that is going to transfer to the right shoulder. It's true. But if I don't do the right shoulder, not only do I not get all the benefits to the right shoulder, but even more importantly, the things that I would learn from doing from the right shoulder and the contrast with the experience of the left shoulder will dramatically increase the effectiveness for the left shoulder. So ideal, I would say, is if you're going to do a movement that's bilateral, then yes, do both sides. And I would suggest, if you were going to practice for like 10 minutes, I would say like 1 minute aside, alternate. So you're alternating back and forth 5 times, because that will, you can play with it and see what gives you the best results. So don't just take my word for it, but I find it extraordinarily helpful. Much better results, much faster doing that kind of pattern. So that would be my recommendation. And then just, I know I said I was going to wrap it up, but just to really wrap it up, honestly, is then don't try to do endurance sessions, because you won't get nearly as good of results. At least in my experience, and I think some good reasons for why this is likely just true for humans. As always, you're free to experiment, but see if this way that I'm describing gives you good results, and then you can experiment from there. But if you feel the necessity to do so, but I would say keep the practice sessions to 5 to 10 minutes or less. Don't think you have to do a certain amount, but more what I'm saying here is don't go over 10 minutes. And at first, do less. If you haven't done this before, then just do it for like 2 minutes and get a sense of it. Because the biggest obstacle, I guess, is if we try to produce too much change too quickly, we meet with too much resistance. So it's a sort of a dance. We want a little bit of change, that change integrates. A little bit of change, that change integrates. Otherwise, what's happening is we're pushing too much change, but then can't really integrate as smoothly. So endurance sessions, my experience, subject to change, I don't know. Maybe I'll find something different later, but I'm pretty experienced And my experience is better keep it shorter. So start, if you've never done it before, 2 minutes. Then once you feel confident with that, you can increase up to 10 minutes. But don't think that 10 minutes is always better than 2 minutes. What's best is what you can be present to and integrate. That's really the truth. And so if you want optimal efficiency of benefits, then that would be the guideline, is you need to find out. It should be comfortable-ish throughout. If you find that you start to get agitated or uncomfortable, probably just means you're tiring yourself. So take that as feedback. You know, just see how can I make it easier for myself? How can I make it gentler for myself? How can I make this more efficient? Some fatigue is likely, but that fatigue is kind of just telling you where you've reached that threshold for you, which is always changing. But if we push beyond that, then what happens is we can't integrate it. So it ends up being not as smooth of an experience. We end up having more unwanted experiences where we feel sore or tired or fearful or anxious or whatever, because it was like too much energy being released and not really having clarity and refinement of how to distribute the energy. So it just gets uncomfortable. So brief practices up to and not past the point of starting to experience fatigue. And I'm not talking about just muscle fatigue. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your fatigue for your ability to be present and to experience it as at a minimal neutrally. If you start to perceive it negatively at all, you just want to be sensitive to it, because it's just an indication, like, enough, good for now, you know, like, I've eaten, I'm nourished, I'm satiated, I don't need to keep eating just because I scheduled 10 minutes for this. So then I would say if you've never done it before, start with just once a day. Once you're comfortable with that, then you can start doing it more often in the day if you find it beneficial, and only up to the point where you find it beneficial. Depending on how the nature of the sensory motor amnesia, it could be that doing 2 minutes a day for a week could take care of all of it or 99% of it. That's a possibility. Is that highly likely? No, only just because, like I said, in general, we're fairly unwell, like relatively more unwell than well, in terms of efficiency of our nervous systems. So probably for most of us, be a little bit more than 1 week to get 99% improvement. Whatever it is, though, you can regulate it so that you get consistent positive results, and that's what you should be getting. So, you know, like I say, start with once per day, and then you can work up to more if you feel you need it. But even in a very intense situation, I would say, I mean, not more than 5 minutes once an hour. Like, that would be pretty intensive. And even that's, I think, pushing it with, I think maybe even 2 hours would be a minimum interval, because you want the integration is very, very important. We want to remain aware to some degree after doing the exercise of how it is that we have these habits of getting back into that old way, because that's important for the integration. Once this new, better, more efficient way starts to emerge, then of course the tendency still is there for it to go back into the old way. So we need to be aware, and we're just starting to notice gently that no, this new way is the better way. Maybe it's not perfect yet, but this new way is the better way. I don't need to do that. So you just have to, you're just aware. It's a newfound skill of relaxation. So there you go. That's my recommendation to you. And these meetings are enormously supportive because it's such a seductively simple thing that we can forget a lot of it. So it's very helpful to have the reminders. They're very supportive. It's because otherwise we'll fall into the habit of just doing this movement that becomes a new repetition. So we need to constantly be reminded of the importance of the fundamentals that will give us good results. So attend the meetings as regularly as possible. It will be very helpful to you. And then ask me if you have any concerns, doubts, or questions that are sincere and that are an obstacle for you or roadblock presently in your exploration. You ask them to me. I mean, obviously not in these meetings because we don't have a Q&A in this meeting, but if you can message me, send me an email, or ask in the Q&As on the other days, because that you can take advantage of those as well for that purpose. They're for anything. It just happens that those are the days that I can do the extra time, the Q&A. I'm way over today. I'm cutting into my lunch, so I'm going to wrap it up now. But thank you, everybody, for your interest. To me, it's such an important information that I think everybody should have this. It should be known by every person, all children. Everybody should know this stuff. It should be, it's how to help yourself. It's how to feel better. And so by you learning it and you applying it, you are spreading that knowledge, and it's a blessing in this world. And I am very grateful to you for that. I want you to have wonderful results. So please apply it. Please let me know what kind of results you're getting, what kind of doubts or questions you have, because I sincerely want you to have the full experience. And then I want you to be so enthusiastic about it that you share it with your loved ones and your friends, so that this knowledge can be available to people everywhere. So thank you, and no pressure. But thank you very much. Blessings to you all, and I will see you next time. Okay, take care.